The day the Vorx arrived, Earth changed forever. No one could have predicted the brutal efficiency with which the alien invaders would cripple humanity. Massive warships, dark as the void, descended from the stars, blocking out the sun as they unleashed hellfire upon the planet. Cities burned in mere minutes, their towering structures crumbling like sandcastles in the wake of an unstoppable force. At first, the world's leaders tried to respond. Military jets scrambled into the sky, missiles fired from every possible defense platform, and nuclear strikes were launched in desperation. But nothing worked. The Vorx fleet, a vast armada with weapons beyond human comprehension, obliterated each attempt with ease. For every fighter jet that soared into battle, a dozen Vorx ships rained down blasts of devastating energy, disintegrating them mid-flight. A global broadcast, at first a cry for help, quickly turned into a grim message of surrender. "We offer no resistance," the world's leaders declared in unison, "for humanity has no chance against such a force." Their voices were distant, robotic, speaking as though the life had already drained from their bodies. Earth, it seemed, was lost. And yet, amid the chaos, a small group of survivors found a sliver of hope. Hidden deep beneath the Earth's surface, the Omega Bastion had been constructed long before the Vorx ever knew of humanity. A secret, self-sustaining underground complex designed to survive apocalyptic events, the Bastion had been a mere contingency plan. Until now. Rook didn't know how much time had passed since the Vorx first arrived. Hours? Days? It didn't matter. What mattered was that Earth had fallen, and humanity's final hope rested on his shoulders. He stood at the entrance of the Bastion's command center, staring at the stark metallic walls as the distant rumble of explosions echoed through the deep tunnels. He could feel the weight of history pressing on him. But there was no time for grief. Behind him, the survivors filed into the safe zone. Engineers, soldiers, civilians, all of them disoriented and exhausted. Their faces, pale and haunted, mirrored his own. No one had expected this kind of invasion. No one had been prepared for the Vorx's savagery. But now, they had to face the impossible reality. The alien race had wiped out Earth's defenses, and the Vorx were relentless. Every second, more survivors were lost. But at least here, in this underground sanctuary, humanity could try to regroup. "Captain," Dr. Lena Voss called out, her voice a calming presence in the chaos. She was tall and wiry, her lab coat stained with soot. As one of the last remaining scientists with any real knowledge of the Vorx, her mind had become an invaluable resource. "The Bastion is secure, for now. But the Vorx know we're here. They'll find us. We need to move fast." Rook nodded grimly. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low and determined. "But this isn't over. Not yet." The deep hum of the Bastion's generators filled the air as Rook turned to survey the handful of soldiers at his command. They were exhausted, their uniforms tattered, but they were alive. And that, for the moment, was enough. But as the gravity of their situation set in, an unsettling truth loomed over them all. Humanity's future was in their hands. Rook knew that he would have to make the impossible choices soon, ones that could decide whether humanity survived or succumbed to extinction. The Omega Bastion was humanity's last stand, and he would not let them fall without a fight. As the sounds of distant Vorx bombardments echoed through the walls, Rook gathered his team together. The war for Earth had just begun, and humanity's fight for survival was only beginning. The silence inside the Omega Bastion was unsettling, broken only by the soft buzz of the emergency lights and the hum of machinery powering the underground complex. The cold, sterile walls of the Bastion contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. Humanity's last survivors huddled together, forming an uneasy alliance, struggling to comprehend the horror of their new reality. Rook paced the command center, his mind racing. Despite the heavy loss, he had to think quickly. Decisions had to be made. He could feel the weight of his position bearing down on him, but he wasn't one to back away from responsibility. He glanced at Dr. Lena Voss, who was hunched over a holographic map of the Earth, her fingers moving rapidly across the interface, trying to make sense of the enemy's movements. Her sharp mind was already working overtime, searching for any advantage humanity could leverage. "We have to know more about them," Rook said, his voice low but firm. "Their tactics, their weaknesses. If we're going to survive, we need information." Lena didn't look up from the map. "I agree, but the Voreks are methodical. They don't make mistakes. Every encounter with them has been disastrous for us. I've been working on something, a way to turn the tables. But I need time." Her eyes flickered toward the door, where a small group of soldiers had gathered. "Time we might not have." Rook turned toward the soldiers, each one as battle-hardened as the next. Sergeant Kira Moretti, a young but fierce leader, stepped forward. "Captain, we've been monitoring the enemy's movements," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed the anxiety they all shared. "The Voreks are advancing fast. It's only a matter of hours before they discover this place. We've got to strike first." Rook's jaw tightened. Kira was right. The Voreks, with their ruthless efficiency, would soon be aware of the Omega Bastion, and once they found it, there would be no escaping their wrath. "How do you propose we do that?" Kira's eyes gleamed with determination. "We hit them where it hurts. Their forward bases, the ones we know about, hidden in the mountains. If we cripple their supply lines and cause enough damage, we might be able to slow their assault. Just enough to give us time to prepare for their next push." Lena stood up, a mix of skepticism and hope in her eyes. "And what happens if they retaliate before we can escape? They'll wipe us out before we can even get close to one of their bases." Rook looked between the two women, his mind working through the possibilities. Every choice they made was a gamble. But he knew there were no easy answers. The Voreks had shown their power. They wouldn't hesitate to finish the job. "We make it quick," he said finally. "We strike fast, hit them hard, and get back before they can counterattack. But it's not just about the strike. It's about sending a message. If we want them to know we're not just going to roll over, we need to show them we can fight back." Kira's eyes narrowed, and she nodded, her face set in grim determination. "Understood, Captain." Rook took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision. The humans in the Bastion had already suffered too much, but this was their chance, perhaps their only chance, to reclaim the fight. The plan was risky, almost suicidal, but they had no other choice. If they didn't act now, the Voreks would wipe them out without a second thought. Dr. Voss finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. "I'll be working on activating that alien artifact I found. It may hold the key to stopping them, but we need to keep them distracted long enough for me to finish." Rook nodded, resolute. "We're not just surviving anymore. We're fighting for humanity's future. Let's give them hell." The team quickly set to work, gathering weapons, supplies, and preparing for the mission. Rook gave one last glance at the map Lena had been working on. The Voreks were closing in, but for the first time in days, he could feel a flicker of hope. It was a slim chance, but it was a chance, and humanity would fight for it. As the soldiers suited up, and the engines of the escape vehicles rumbled to life, Rook's thoughts raced. They were going into enemy territory, where the Voreks held the advantage. But there was one thing the Voreks didn't understand: humanity's determination to survive, and humanity's capacity to fight back. The mission was set into motion with a flurry of last-minute preparations. The soldiers were outfitted with a mix of human and repurposed Voreks technology, each piece of gear a testament to humanity's adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds. Sergeant Kira Moretti led the charge, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a practiced wariness. She'd fought in dozens of battlefields, but this was different. The Voreks were no ordinary enemy. They were predators. Rook could feel the weight of the decision as he stood by the hangar doors. His mind raced with every possibility, every scenario. The plan was simple on paper: strike the Voreks' forward base, cripple their supply lines, and retreat before they could retaliate. But the Vorx didn't operate on predictable patterns. They were swift, ruthless, and utterly relentless. The survivors inside the Bastion were depending on this mission, and Rook couldn't afford failure. Lina Voss had already finished her work on the alien artifact, but it was still in the early stages. The artifact, an ancient piece of technology buried beneath the earth, could hold the key to disrupting the Vorx's advanced weaponry, but it was unpredictable. Lina needed time to understand it fully, and every second they wasted was another step closer to total annihilation. "Captain, we're ready," Kira called out from the front of the vehicle, her voice steady, but edged with tension. Rook nodded sharply. "Move out, and stay sharp. The Vorx are clever, and they'll be expecting something. We need to hit them hard and fast." The convoy of vehicles sped out of the Bastion's hidden entrance, cutting through the darkened landscape. As they approached the target zone, the landscape became more alien. The Vorx had already begun to terraform the area, their influence spreading like a sickness. The ground was scorched, trees and rocks twisted into unnatural shapes by the alien technology that had begun to seep into the earth itself. "We're close," Kira muttered. "Base is just ahead." Rook's pulse quickened. They were minutes away from the enemy's front lines. A simple strike on their supply depot could throw the Vorx into disarray, but it also meant they'd be deep in hostile territory. Once the attack began, there would be no turning back. "Eyes up," Rook said, voice low, but filled with authority. "This is a hit and run. Disable their supplies, leave nothing but confusion in our wake, and then we vanish. We can't afford to be heroes today, just survivors." The soldiers nodded in unison. Their expressions were grim, but determined. They knew the risks, and they knew the stakes. But this wasn't just a raid. It was a statement. Humanity wasn't done yet. Not while they still had breath in their lungs and blood in their veins. As they neared the base, Rook signaled for the convoy to slow. The moment of truth had arrived. The Vorx outposts ahead were heavily fortified, their dark silhouettes barely visible against the harsh glow of alien lights that buzzed in the distance. The eerie hum of their machinery reverberated through the ground, as though the very earth trembled beneath them. "On my mark," Rook whispered, eyes narrowed as he studied the layout. 5 seconds, and we hit them with everything we've got. No mercy. His heart thudded in his chest, but he forced himself to focus. Kira's squadron was already disembarking, moving in a tight formation, their weapons raised and ready. They'd trained for moments like this, though nothing could fully prepare them for the chaos of war, especially not against an enemy like the Vorx. Rook gave the signal, and in an instant, the quiet of the night was shattered. The soldiers surged forward, their weapons tearing into the Vorx defenses. Explosions lit up the dark horizon, sending shrapnel flying in every direction. The Vorx, stunned by the sudden assault, scrambled to retaliate. But the humans were fast, overwhelming their positions with tactics they couldn't anticipate. The fight was brutal. The Vorx soldiers were monstrous, their alien physiology making them more durable and deadly than any human opponent. But the humans fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Every strike was personal. Every kill was a message. Rook's breath came in heavy bursts as he led the charge, gunning down a pair of Vorx soldiers who attempted to flank them. His pulse pounded in his ears, but he pushed the fear aside, focusing on the mission. Kira was already planting charges near the Vorx's supply vaults, her movements swift and precise. The rest of the team covered her, taking down any Vorx that dared to approach. Charges set. Kira shouted over the comms, "We're pulling back. Now." Rook didn't hesitate. "Move. Now." As they retreated into the cover of the smoke and chaos, the ground behind them exploded in a violent eruption. The Vorx's supply depot was obliterated, sending debris flying in all directions. The blast created a massive cloud of dust, momentarily hiding the human escape, but they couldn't linger. The Vorx would regroup and come for them with everything they had. Rook gave one last glance at the smoldering ruins before pushing forward. "We've done what we came for," he said, his voice steady. "Let's get back to the Bastion." But as they raced toward their extraction point, Rook couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Vorx would not take this defeat lying down. They would hunt them relentlessly until humanity was nothing but a memory. The moment the human strike team made it back to the Omega Bastion, the atmosphere inside the complex shifted. It was a fleeting victory, but a victory nonetheless. The blast from their attack had sent shockwaves through the Vorx forces, and for a brief moment, the team felt the weight of their success. The survivors in the Bastion had something to hold on to, a tangible reminder that humanity was capable of fighting back. But the feeling of triumph was short-lived. The blast had been seen. The Vorx forces had already begun regrouping, their retaliation imminent. The Omega Bastion, secure as it was, could not hide forever. The team, panting and covered in dirt, rushed through the corridors, the sound of their boots echoing off the metal walls. Rook's mind was already working. Their initial strike had been a success, but it hadn't been enough. The Vorx were far too advanced, too well organized to be deterred by one attack. They would come, full force, with everything they had. Rook's jaw clenched as he paced the command center, his eyes locked on the flashing red lights, signaling the countdown to the next wave of the enemy. Dr. Lena Voss stood near one of the consoles, her fingers flying across the touchpad. The data streaming in was almost overwhelming. Satellite images of Vorx movements, intercepted communications, and updates on their assault plans. But none of it was good news. "Captain," Lena said, her voice tight with worry. "The Vorx are pulling back some of their forces, but they're not retreating. They're consolidating. They know where we are." Rook turned to face her, his expression grim. "We don't have much time. What's the situation with the artifact? Can it help us?" Lena's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I've made progress, but we're not there yet. The artifact, whatever it is, holds immense power, but I don't understand how to control it completely. I need more time." Rook wasn't sure they had more time. The Vorx were already closing in on their position, and the Bastion's defenses, while strong, wouldn't hold against a full-scale assault. They were trapped. Their only hope was that Lena's discovery could somehow turn the tide. But that hope was thin. Sergeant Kira Moretti, still wearing the dirt and blood from the raid, entered the command center. "Captain, we got movement. Multiple Vorx ships on the radar. They're coming fast. If we don't do something, they'll be here within hours." Rook exhaled sharply. "Then we don't wait. We fight. We need to hit them while they're still in the air, while we still have a shot at crippling them." Kira nodded. "I'll start prepping the teams. We've got a lot of injured, but we can still mobilize. We'll need every hand we've got." Lena turned from the console, her face drawn. "If we attack them directly, we'll never make it. We have to buy time. The artifact, if it works." "How long?" Rook interrupted, his voice commanding. Lena swallowed hard. "Maybe an hour, maybe less. But if we can tap into their communication systems, disable their tech, it could give us a real edge." Rook looked over at Kira, whose face was set in a mask of determination. "I'll leave the assault to you. Get your people ready. We've got one shot at this." Kira saluted, the same fierce look in her eyes that had been there since the first raid. "Understood, sir." As the soldiers scrambled to organize, Rook pulled Lena aside. "You know the stakes," he said quietly, "if you can't activate that artifact." "I will," Lena interrupted, her voice steady despite the pressure. "It's not just for us, Captain. If we can't stop them, humanity's done for. I know what's at risk." Rook met her gaze, understanding the gravity of her words. He didn't know if the artifact would work, or if it would even be enough to turn the tide. But it was their last hope. They couldn't back down now. The countdown continued on the digital clock behind him, ticking down with every second. The Bastion's heavy doors were already sealed tight, and the survivors inside had begun to prepare for what was coming. But even as they rallied together, a sense of unease permeated the air. No one spoke of it, but they all felt it. The weight of uncertainty, the feeling that their future was hanging by a thread. As Rook walked through the corridors, past the soldiers checking their weapons, and the technicians working furiously to fortify the Bastion's defenses, he knew the fight was far from over. The Voreks would come, and they would come with everything they had. But humanity's will to survive was strong, and in the face of extinction, they would never go quietly. And Rook would lead them, not because he was the strongest, but because he knew there was no other choice. The seconds ticked away like a countdown to their inevitable confrontation. Inside the Omega Bastion, there was a palpable tension in the air. Soldiers double-checked their weapons. Engineers worked frantically on last-minute modifications to the Bastion's energy shields, and civilians prayed in the dimly lit corners of the complex. Everyone was ready, yet no one was prepared for the storm that was about to descend on them. Rook stood at the front of the command center, his eyes scanning the data streaming in from every available source. The Voreks were on their way. He could feel the ground beneath him tremble slightly, an ominous sign of the energy buildup that signaled the approach of the enemy ships. The Voreks fleet was vast, their technology terrifyingly advanced. If they struck with everything they had, it could mean the end of everything. But Rook wasn't about to go down without a fight. "How much time, Lena?" he asked, turning to Dr. Lena Voss, who was once again hunched over her terminal, fingers flying over holographic displays. 15 minutes, she replied, her voice steady despite the urgency. "I've almost got the artifact's core interface aligned with their communication systems, but I need just a little more time. The Voreks won't wait for us to be ready, though. We'll need to act now, or we won't get another chance." Rook nodded. "Then we strike first. I want teams Alpha and Bravo on the front lines, defending our position while we launch the counteroffensive. If we can disrupt their communication systems and disable their weapons, we stand a chance." "Understood," Kira replied, her voice calm but razor-sharp with the focus of a seasoned leader. "I'll make sure the teams are ready. We'll buy you the time you need." Rook turned to Lena, his face intense. "This is our last shot, Lena. If the artifact works, if it really disrupts their tech, it could give us a chance to push back. But if it doesn't—" "I know," Lena interrupted, her voice hardening. "I've seen what the Voreks are capable of. We either win this or we're extinct. But I'm not giving up." Rook gave her a tight nod, his eyes scanning the terminal where the last remnants of their hope were hidden within the artifact. As the minutes ticked away, he tried to push down the fear that gripped him. Every moment spent waiting felt like a betrayal of the lives already lost. The first Vorek ships appeared on the radar. They were massive, like dark, twisted versions of Earth's battleships, and their presence filled Rook with a cold, determined rage. The enemy was closing in fast, and they would have no mercy. "Teams Alpha and Bravo, move out." Kira's voice cracked through the comms. "Defensive positions, now." The underground tunnels erupted with the sound of soldiers moving into place, weapons at the ready. They had trained for this moment, but there was no real preparation for the sheer terror of facing the Voreks. Their monstrous technology, their relentless brutality. It was all coming for them. And yet, the humans stood resolute. Rook was among the last to leave the command center, taking a final look at Lena as she remained seated at the terminal. She was deep in concentration, muttering to herself as she worked, but her eyes flickered with the same raw determination that was driving him forward. "Lena," he called, voice soft yet heavy with meaning. "You've got this. We'll hold them off as long as we can. Just make it work." Lena gave him a tight smile, though her eyes were filled with fear and resolve. "We'll make it work, Captain. I promise." With that, Rook joined Kira and the rest of the soldiers at the front lines. The rest of humanity was depending on them. There would be no retreat, no fallback. If they were to go out, they would do it fighting with everything they had. The first Vorex ship broke through the atmosphere, a dark shadow blotting out the sky. It was massive, too large to fathom. Its surface glowed with a malevolent energy as it began to descend toward the Earth. The air around the Bastion rippled with the pulse of its weapons charging. "We've got incoming," Kira shouted over the comms. "Brace yourselves." The sound of weapons charging up and the hum of energy fields filled the air as humanity's last stand was about to begin. The soldiers locked into position, weapons raised. The Omega Bastion's defenses were activated, the massive energy shields flickering to life, but it wouldn't be enough to stop the Vorex for long. The first shots fired, blinding, thunderous, screamed toward the Bastion's position, and Rook's heart slammed in his chest. This was it. The Vorex had arrived. The ground shook violently as the first salvo from the Vorex ship struck the Earth, a searing beam of energy that lit up the sky like a second sun. The Bastion's energy shields flared to life, absorbing the blast, but the shockwave reverberated through the structure, rattling the metal walls. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the chaos began. "Shields are holding," Kira shouted, her voice tight with tension, as the soldiers huddled behind cover, weapons raised, scanning the horizon. The massive Vorex ship, now hovering above the Earth, unleashed a second volley. This time, the energy beams split into smaller projectiles, streaking toward the ground like falling stars, each one destined to bring death. The shields held again, but the impact of each shot reverberated through every surface, threatening to buckle under the pressure. "We don't have long before they overwhelm us," Rook said, his eyes scanning the enemy vessel, trying to track its movements. "Focus fire on those secondary weapon turrets. If we don't take out their weapons, they'll bring the full weight of their fleet down on us." The soldiers didn't hesitate. The heavy pulse rifles they wielded vibrated with each shot as they fired in unison, aiming for the glowing energy nodes on the Vorex ship. The fire was continuous, a hail of focused laser beams, but each blast seemed to have little effect on the massive craft, its armor resistant to all human technology. "We need something heavier," Rook muttered under his breath. "Lena, how much longer?" "We're close." Lena's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm tapping into their communications. The artifact should be ready in a minute. Just hold them off." "Hold them off," Rook echoed, his heart racing. "We'll need more than luck for that." As if to answer his doubt, the Vorex ship shifted, launching a series of smaller craft, drones that descended rapidly toward the Bastion's position. The air was filled with the deafening sound of their engines, the drones quickly forming a cloud of destruction. Each one carried its own weaponry, and they were closing fast. Kira shouted orders to her teams, the soldiers splitting up to deal with the incoming threat. Rook took a deep breath and bolted to a nearby turret emplacement. He slammed his hand onto the activation panel, and the massive cannon came to life with a deep, resonating hum. The Vorex drones appeared like a swarm of deadly insects, but Rook's gunfire cut through their numbers, each blast sending a drone spiraling out of control. The heavy fire from the drones was relentless, though. As they swooped in on the Bastion's defenses, the energy shields flickered and sputtered under the strain. Rook gritted his teeth, his hands shaking as he fired relentlessly, trying to hold the line. But it wasn't enough. As the swarm neared, one of the drones launched a missile directly at the shield generators. The explosion rocked the Bastion, and for a split second, the shields flickered and went down. The air around them crackled with the sound of charged weapons preparing to strike. Rook's heart pounded in his chest as the entire defensive perimeter seemed to collapse under the weight of the assault. "Damn it." Kira cursed as her team scrambled to reload and reestablish fire. "Get those shields back up, or we're done for." Just as the Vorex drones neared the breach, a bright, blinding pulse shot up from the heart of the Bastion. The artifact, the key to their survival, activated. The electromagnetic pulse swept across the battlefield, crashing into the Vorac's communications and weapon systems with the force of a storm. The drones faltered in midair, their systems glitching and stuttering, some falling out of formation as their internal processors fried. Rook saw the opening. "Now," he yelled, as his team, eyes wide with disbelief, surged forward, charging into the chaos. Their weapons roared to life, picking off the vulnerable drones, turning the tide of the battle. Lena's voice came through the comms again, sharp with exhilaration. "The artifact is working. I've hacked into their systems. Their weapons are down. They can't shoot us with the same firepower anymore." Rook's chest tightened with relief, but there was no time to savor the victory. The main Vorax ship, though momentarily disabled, was still a colossal threat. They had to bring it down before the enemy regained control. "Focus fire on the main ship," Rook barked. "It's now or never." The soldiers, emboldened by the momentary advantage, poured every ounce of firepower into the main ship. Rook could feel his heart hammering as the barrage of human-made laser fire hit the vessel, denting its metallic surface. The Vorax retaliated, unleashing an energy pulse that shook the entire Bastion to its core, but the artifact had given them the moment they needed. The main ship began to falter, and Rook saw a flash of light. One of the ship's energy nodes had ruptured. The Vorax vessel trembled, its massive form shuddering in the air. Rook allowed himself a brief moment of hope, but they weren't out of the woods yet. The Vorax would fight back, harder, faster, and with far more devastating force. This was just the beginning. The massive Vorax ship groaned under the barrage of human fire, its hull shaking as energy pulses tore through the outer layers. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the tide had shifted, the human resolve having found its mark. But Rook knew better than to get hopeful. This battle was far from over, and the Vorax were not the type of enemy to retreat easily. The ship's massive thrusters roared to life again, and the craft lurched upward, narrowly avoiding another round of fire from Rook's team. It hovered for a moment, the air crackling with energy as the Vorax vessel recalibrated its weapons. Then, a blinding flash of light erupted from its belly. An energy pulse that exploded outward like a tidal wave, a destructive force so powerful it pushed the remaining drones aside, sending shockwaves through the Bastion's defenses. "Shields are down," Kira shouted through the comms, panic evident in her voice. "We can't hold much longer without them." Rook's stomach twisted. Without the energy shields, the Bastion was vulnerable. They were exposed. "Get them back up," Rook barked. "Lena, can you help with that?" "I'm still working on the artifact." Lena's voice crackled with tension. "But if we can just keep them distracted for a few more minutes, I think I can stabilize the link long enough to." Another massive blast from the Vorax ship struck the Bastion's outer wall, sending debris flying through the air. The vibration was enough to make Rook's teeth rattle. He glanced around at the soldiers scrambling to regroup, the once strong defensive lines now looking like a shell of their former selves. The Vorax were relentless. They had expected resistance, but not this kind of defiance. "We need to buy more time," Rook said, his voice low but firm. "Kira, take your team and hit them hard. We need to distract them long enough for Lena to finish whatever she's doing." Kira's eyes were grim as she surveyed the scene. "Got it, Captain. We'll keep them off you." As Kira's team moved out, Rook couldn't shake the feeling that the clock was ticking far too quickly. Every second they bought was another second they could use to turn the tide, but they were running out of those precious moments. The Vorax wouldn't stop until they had wiped humanity off the face of the earth. Rook's thoughts raced as he moved to the communications terminal. "Lena," he said, voice edged with urgency, "tell me what you need. We can't afford to wait any longer." "I'm almost there," Lena replied, her voice sharp with focus. "I've gained full access to their internal network. If I can trigger the artifact's core sequence, we might be able to send a shockwave through their entire fleet. But it's risky. If I trigger it too soon." "Then we make sure you don't fail," Rook interrupted. "We'll hold them off, no matter the cost. You're our last shot." As if on cue, the Vorex ship fired again, this time launching multiple plasma projectiles aimed directly at the Bastion's central core. The impact was deafening. The ground buckled under the force, and Rook was thrown to the floor, his vision blurred as the walls shook around him. Dust and smoke filled the air, obscuring his view. When the dust settled, the once strong central hub of the Bastion was now a mangled mess of twisted metal and ruined equipment. The devastation was horrifying. The core was breached, and the situation had escalated to a critical level. "Report," Rook shouted, his voice hoarse, as he climbed to his feet, his head swimming. Kira's voice came through the comms, her tone sharp despite the chaos. "We're still holding off the drones, but the Vorex ship's reinforcements are on the way. It's getting worse by the minute." Rook wiped the blood from his face, his jaw clenched. He couldn't afford to think about how bad things were. They had no choice but to keep fighting. "Lena," he said again, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "We need it now. Whatever it takes. We can't wait any longer." Lena's voice crackled with determination. "I'm doing it. Brace yourselves." There was a long, agonizing pause. Rook didn't breathe, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, the ground beneath him trembled once more. This time, it was different. The entire Bastion seemed to hum, vibrating with a low-frequency pulse that rattled the metal beams and sent a chill down his spine. And then, everything stopped. The Vorex ships hovering above the Bastion flickered, their once glowing engines sputtering out. For a split second, it looked as if the entire enemy fleet had frozen in place. Lena's voice came through, quiet but triumphant. "I did it. I activated the artifact's pulse. It's working." Rook's breath caught in his throat. "Are they disabled?" Lena's voice, though strained, was filled with hope. "For now. Their ships are in disarray. But it's not permanent. We have to finish them before they recover." Rook nodded, feeling a flicker of something in his chest, something that resembled hope. The Vorex weren't done, but neither were they. "This is it, people," he said, rallying his troops. "We push now. They're vulnerable. Let's end this." The battlefield was chaotic, but now, for the first time in hours, there was a glimmer of hope. The Vorex ships, once unstoppable, were now disoriented, their movements sluggish as their communication systems sputtered. The electromagnetic pulse from the artifact had disrupted their fleet, buying humanity the precious seconds they desperately needed. Rook stood at the front of the fray, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Vorex fleet was still formidable. Massive ships were descending to the ground, and drones swarmed overhead. But now, they were vulnerable. They were no longer a faceless, overwhelming tide of destruction. They were disorganized, scrambling to recover, and humanity had one chance to strike before they regained control. "Kira," Rook shouted over the roar of the battle. "All units, full assault. Hit them now while they're down." Kira's voice came through the comms, sharp and filled with determination. "Roger that. We've got them on the ropes, Captain. Let's finish this." The human forces surged forward, a sea of soldiers with fire in their eyes. The pulse rifles that had once seemed so ineffective now found their mark with deadly precision. The Vorex drones, once relentless and near impossible to hit, were now falling from the sky in droves, their systems fried by Lena's pulse. Each shot was a small victory. Each enemy craft that exploded in a fiery ball of debris was another step toward humanity's survival. The main Vorex ship, still hovering above them, seemed to pulse with a faint, unsettling glow. Its massive energy cannon, the weapon that had decimated so much of the Bastion, was recharging, slowly. But there was something different about it now. The Vorex were struggling to keep their systems online. "This is it," Rook muttered, tightening his grip on his rifle. "Lena, you've got one more shot at them. Can you take that ship down?" "I'm on it," Lena replied, her voice now crackling through the comms with fierce determination. I've hacked their core systems. If I can direct the artifact's pulse directly at their central engine, we'll fry it. Permanently. Rook nodded. Do it. Now. Lena's hands flew across the console, her fingers moving with a speed born of desperation. The artifact, a powerful alien device now fused into the Bastion's mainframe, pulsed in response. Rook could feel the hum of the energy even from a distance. His heart pounded in his chest. If Lena could pull this off, it would be the decisive blow. The main Vorek ship shimmered in the air above them. The weapon was charged. Rook had a split second to make a decision. He threw himself behind a nearby turret as the Vorek's energy cannon fired. The blast streaked across the sky, aimed directly at the Bastion's core. Time slowed. Then, just as the blast was about to hit, a pulse of blue energy shot out from the artifact, striking the Vorek ship in a brilliant explosion of light. For a moment, it seemed as if everything had stopped. Then the Vorek ship staggered, its engines faltering, its weapons collapsing in on themselves. The glow that had once filled the Vorek's vessel dimmed, flickering like a dying star. Rook didn't wait for confirmation. He surged forward with his team, charging the remaining Vorek's forces as they scrambled to regain control. The human soldiers advanced with a renewed ferocity, their desperation now turned into the kind of pure determination only the brink of extinction could bring. One by one, the Vorek ships fell, their systems still scrambling to recover from the artifact's pulse. The drones that had once been everywhere were now disintegrating under human fire. The Voreks were losing, their invincible aura shattering in real time. Rook ran toward the wreckage of the Vorek ship that had once seemed so invulnerable. The crew of the Bastion, bloody but unbroken, followed him into the heart of the battlefield. Kira and her soldiers led the charge, tearing through the remaining Vorek's forces with ruthless efficiency. The final strike came with an explosion that tore through the remaining Vorek ship, sending debris into the air. The remaining drones scrambled in disarray, their connections severed. For a moment, it was silent. The battle was over. Rook stood, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the dust settled. His heart was still racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from the realization that they had won. "We did it," Lena's voice came through the comms, barely audible over the static. "It's over." Rook nodded, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his mind still buzzing with disbelief. They had done it. They had stopped the Voreks. For now, at least. Humanity had not only survived, but it had struck back in a way the Voreks had never anticipated. And though the cost had been high, the will to fight, to push back against the darkness, had never been stronger. The Omega Bastion had held. Earth was safe. For now.